Hey everyone, welcome back to this week's episode of the Weekly Boost podcast. Today, or as you're listening to this, it's going to be releasing on the first Monday in May. And for us, May is a special month. As you've been kind of informed from episodes in the past, we have partnered with the American Cancer Society and the hope to raise funds and awareness for cancer research. As you guys may know or may not know, May is Cancer Research Month. And so we thought it'd be fitting to partner with ACS and sort of make our mark, as well as help a great cause that is the American Cancer Society. So looking forward, this month is going to be packed with a lot of ACS content. We're going to try to tailor a lot of our episodes to certain discussions that we find interesting, as well as having a couple special guests on and hearing their experiences and having a good conversation about it. But without further ado, I hope you guys enjoy this episode, and we've been really excited to share this with you.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's May already, right? I mean, we've been planning this in the works for 3 months or so, I think, and I'm really excited because we hear so much about from our guests this importance of like giving back. You heard it with like Donovan talking about the various camps in Oklahoma and Milwaukee about giving back. You hear like even the just joining us for podcasts like is a form of like giving back, and like John Corcoran, like nurturing this community of podcasters that that love the medium, right?
Yeah.
And I think this is a really key thing for us too, is finding a way to give back, and it combines a lot of the things that we're passionate about. I know I'll let you get into this a little bit, but as a whole, you are research driven. I remember, that's one of the things I enjoyed a lot about studying science, is the research aspect and what you can learn from the setbacks of it and stuff. And, this just made perfect sense as we were talking to our partners over there at ACS. It's just been really easy to get something like this going. So we appreciate what they were able to do for us. But like I said, and Austin said, this is going to be a fun little campaign of, are there 5 Mondays in May?
I think there are. Yeah. We're fortunate. Man. We got a 5 Monday month.
Four. I don't know. Maybe that's just off, but so we'll have to get creative a little bit. But 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, 5. The 31st is on it. Well, that's good. It extends our campaign based on episode schedules. But we'll get a little bit more into that. But I want to start with you, Austin, because this was spearheaded by you. When you were. This feels weird, like I'm interviewing you. I don't like this.
That's fine.
when you were at Ripon, I know, you come in as an undergrad, you want to, set yourself apart and really find ways to give back. And I know try to get something set up at Ripon. What was that again? Was it?
I kind of was branching off of a similar sort of group or club that takes place in a lot of schools in our conference specifically, as well as schools across the country, but it's called Colleges Against Cancer. And it's practically a mini American Cancer Society that's home based in your institution, right? So you're pretty much like a little tiny headquarters. And I tried getting that going with a lot of the individuals that I came across at Ripon. They sounded very enthusiastic about getting this started. It was just very unfortunate that like my education career was taking a different path, and I had to move on from that venture. But the idea never left me. Like I always wanted to do something that was able to give back to a community that I felt so strongly about. And obviously cancer affects 1 in every 3 people on average. And you're going to know somebody that is going to be either affected by this or diagnose themselves with this. And it was just something that I felt like I needed to do. And so using our platform, the Weekly Boost podcast, it seemed like the perfect match because it's something that we're both passionate about. There's aspects to American Cancer Society that are heavily research driven, as well as with what you're interested in and like the historical aspects of public health. And, the institution of public health itself stems directly with a lot of the movements that the American Cancer Society has kind of initiated on their own. And so it was just a great mesh of passions, and we're really looking forward to telling you more about it. We're going to get into it as the episode gets on, obviously, but that's kind of where this idea came from.
And I'm glad you brought up public health, and I think we talk about it a lot in like previous episodes leading up to, and that's obviously to be expected with class on the brain 24/7. But
Yeah.
this idea of the American Cancer Society being instrumental in requiring warning labels on cigarette
Hmm.
packages. They're the largest private nonprofit funder of cancer research in the United States. And,
Hmm.
like we started to allude to in previous episodes, like for the first time in their history, their research, however many years it is, I mean, it was in jeopardy.
Yeah.
And that's something that's really scary to think about. And the, cancer prevention and the physicals that go into that, the mammograms and the pap
Hmm.
smears and all kinds of things that go on, to think that, a lot of those services are put on hold because of the pandemic is scary.
Hmm.
And that's why, campaigns like this and helping out the American Cancer Society is all the more important, in my opinion.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And we couldn't be supporting a better cause for this, because they've been around through it all. Since 1946, the American Cancer Society has practically invested $5 billion to cancer research.
It's
And,
crazy.
that may seem like a small number, like in today's terms of money, but in 1946 to now, $5 billion towards this one thing is huge for
Yeah.
progressing and, finding innovation in ways that we treat and prevent and detect cancer. It's
Yeah.
incredible that in their 107 years that they've been able to stay this strong and continue to promote such a great just foundation for people to look to for not only financial support, but as well as social and emotional support. There's a lot of links on their websites that allow you to seek help in other ways. If you're a grieving family member, or if you're curious yourself, right? Like you need a second opinion, but can't necessarily have the time to go to another physician, or you're a family member that's curious about, a certain family member's condition. They have tons of resources available for you to look at and just get a little bit of a better grasp on what's going on, because cancer hits like a brick wall. Like I've been around people in my lifetime and people in my family that it was so sudden that they didn't really have time to even understand. And the fact that there's a resource like this out there, it makes it easier to know that something positive can come from this.
Yeah, and I mean, over 5 billion is just a staggering amount. And right now, there's as of today, when March 1st of this year, there's 689 grants out throughout the United States,
Mhm.
with over $380 million worth of
Yeah.
grants given to fund certain things. There's 15 in
Yeah.
Wisconsin, and I kind of wanted to talk a little bit about that. Maybe in the second half of the episode. But they also, not only do they fund research projects through like fellowships and other things, they also conduct their own research. And there's these large scale nationwide cancer prevention studies is kind of what we're get illuminating, use that word twice, but there's also like different behavioral factors that studies look into, and then, as we'll talk about, they funded 49 Nobel Prize winning work. So
Yeah.
it's they're all over the board, like you said, with the amount of resources that are available. And they really, it's not just about the grim part of it, right? I don't know if you had Relay for Life at high school, or
We did. We did something similar
okay.
like that with our honor society.
So kind of similar to Cassidy's story, we had a teammate on our high school baseball team that had, I don't know if it was non-Hodgkin's or Hodgkin's lymphoma, but regardless, that affected him in high school. I think it was one of our first few, either freshman or sophomore year. And, the Relay for Life, that the community that comes around and helps him out was just staggering. And that's all thanks to, organization like the American Cancer Society, as well as these events like Relay for Life. And you're staying up all night, and it gives people, like in the National Honor Society, we had like tasks, and we're in charge of different committees. So it does a lot for, professional skill building, as well as giving just people that are caregivers, survivors, people that are battling with cancer right now, like a sense of community that, is can be uplifting in a time that everything around you is not.
Yeah. And we couldn't be here without the help of Andrew and Casey, obviously.
Yeah.
Like, I know we alluded to this earlier in past episodes, but talk about two people that are just all on board with, supporting something that could support the American Cancer Society. Yeah. They've been behind us ever since, and obviously supporting us through all this and kind of giving us the resources. But we just like to thank them a little bit, because we wouldn't be able to really talk about this stuff for you guys without their help. But I'm really happy that you brought up like all the things that ACS does, because this year especially, it's been immensely difficult for individuals that are diagnosed with cancer or seeking cancer treatment to go out and get the treatment that they need. Obviously, with the global pandemic shutting a lot of stuff down, it's been extremely difficult for anybody, even physicians that are treating these patients, to get to the clinics and get to the hospitals where these treatments are awaiting the patients. And we were talking about this with Andrew and Casey behind the scenes, but just the importance of getting awareness for the idea that it's safe to go back to the hospital and get treatment. Like it's going to be better than what it has been, obviously, but that's something that was a detriment to, fighting cancer, was this pandemic. And I don't think a lot of people put that at the forefront of like one of the secondary issues that's coming from this. But like many people are focused on, how's the economy recovering, or, what are businesses doing and stuff like that. But something as major as, cancer that afflicts 1 in 3 people in the United States, like the treatments and all that sort of stuff were put on hold as well. And so kind of bringing light to that and showing how much ACS means to those people is pretty important.
Yeah, I agree with you there. And, when we first kind of thought about this, like, we're totally on board. We want to give back. And then you kind of realize like, hey, like we're not this big show. We're not, this big platform that we're going to get a ton of money. I just think that, like I said before, this idea of giving back is just super important. And, good things come from it. It's not just a cool t-shirt that you could be getting, but, it's just awareness to something that, like we said, kind of sometimes falls on the back burner. And a lot of times the attention is put on diagnoses and treatment from there. And, I'm just looking at their areas of research, and, it's not just cause and the biology of cancer, which, I mean, you're super interested in. It's treatment, prevention, early detection, diagnosis, and survivorship too. And all that. I mean, once you truly look at everything that they're able to work towards, it's astounding.
Yeah. And something that gets kind of overlooked as we kind of progress through society is the idea that, cancer can't be prevented because it's the random luck of like the bad luck. Right. Yeah. Well, thanks to some of the resources that Casey has brought up for us, we're able to like talk about some of these things and give you some statistics. We're not just going to fill the episode with statistics, because that would be somewhat tedious, and you can do all your due diligence and look them up on your own. But the idea that cancer can be prevented is something that I've always kind of put at the forefront of my drive and passion for research. And just reading here, 42% of newly diagnosed cancers, excluding, skin cancer, melanoma, are preventable. And that's a staggering number. It's hard to quantify that in your brain, because that's almost 800,000 cases in 2021 could be avoided based off of lifestyle choices and practices, and like, quitting smoking, eating healthy, exercise, and all that sort of stuff. And I don't know about you, but when I'm told or like informed about cancer statistics, it's mostly in the form of just that random chance, like they've been a totally healthy individual and all that sort of stuff. But we also have to bring light to the idea that there are steps that we can do to prevent cancer. And quite frankly, we're going to talk about that in the next couple of episodes this month. But just kind of to, get your feet wet a little bit, and the idea of like what to expect. We're kind of base some episodes off of statistical information and some disparities in healthcare as well. And we're also just going to have some guests on that can kind of talk about the emotional side and like the trauma, but as well as the triumph that came from their diagnosis, and what the support system that they had behind them could help them get through.
I wanted to talk about this because I'm looking on their website, before we start recording this episode, and the American Cancer Society was really like influential in spurring the stop smoking movement.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you brought it up briefly, but it's really these two individuals that Hammond and Horn, two PhDs working for the American Cancer Society, and they start this cohort study, and they're able to give pretty definitive data about the dangers of smoking, and they write President Kennedy. And as I look through this more and more, it's like I said in the beginning of the episode, the warning labels on cigarettes, and the way we think about cancer prevention, before the 1900s, lung disease, and before industrialization, obviously, these things are not necessarily at the forefront. It's more, epidemics and viruses and
infectious
things.
diseases,
And we talked about this transition. I don't know if we talked about it on the air, but this transition to internalized disease. And they published this final report in January of 1964. So 50 years ago, when this was written, that cigarette smoking is a health hazard of sufficient importance in the United States. And the more you unpack this story about smoking in the United States and the advertisement, there's just more layers. And there's more work to be done, and so I'm really skeptical of these great men in science narratives, right? And like Edward Jenner, how I talked about with the vaccination thing last week, and how problematic some of these stories are by not addressing, the people that help along the way. But something like this, I think, is an exception, right? They're people that are willing to go against the grain, and the understandings in the name of health. So I think this is a really good story and we can link this, if anybody's interested, let us know. And as I read it more thoroughly, and we can talk about it later on when we talk about health disparities and things like that. But
touching on that, I'm happy you brought up big tobacco, because I've talked about it in our episode book club, but the book Emperor of All Maladies does an excellent job of talking about the history of cancer and how certain events like what happened in the 50s and 60s against smoking kind of stirred the pot for funding for cancer research. And that was one of the big outcomes of that, was somebody in science was willing to go against the big business and tobacco industry in order to benefit people, in order to promote health and wellness, and over the almighty dollar. And that was something unheard of at the time, because the industrialization, as much as it was becoming more modernization rather than industrialization, I'm saying we as a human race here, we cared more about money at the time than health. We were willing to put certain things on the on the back burner instead of caring about people's well-being. And those individuals that you mentioned, as well as the numerous individuals that kind of formed together to create the American Cancer Society, as well as other national institutes of health against cancer and stuff like that, they really did go against the grain, and thankful for that, because they've obviously done more than you can quantify in your head. They've done so much. So
and most recently in 2019, the American Cancer Society funds a Nobel Prize winning research in physiology or medicine about this molecular switch of how cells respond to changing oxygen levels, and the way in which cells use oxygen when there's deficiency of oxygen, things like that, is really instrumental in discovering treatments to cancer, they found out. And cancer cells hijack the oxygen process and to increase their metabolism, because fundamentally cancer cells are just their primary goal is just reproduce, and and then that's how tumors grow and cancer metastasizes, and so, and that was in 2019. So that's now good. I don't know when they award the prizes, but going on 2 years. So, and it's
kind of just rounding up this whole little spiel about prevention, and it's kind of a big deal with these numbers that I'm about to give you. But the leading causes of death for males in cancer diagnoses, starting number 1 is lung, prostate, and colon. Those top three are we have the most sensitive tests for those and prevention measures and protocols in place for those. They're the three that are probably the most easily detectable as well as preventable if you think about it. We have colon screenings all the time that you can go in and get when you turn 50 to check for polyps in your colon. The higher death rate for lung cancer is most effectively compared with the incidence of smoking. That's one of the major causes of that. And then prostate, obviously, with higher levels of testosterone. Testosterone is actually a carcinogen in higher doses. That's something that I've learned over the past couple of years. But with female, as you kind of expected, similar. But the number one for female is breast cancer. Number two, lung, and number three, colon. Again, we have several prevention measures in place in order to, detect these things early and prevent these numbers. However, that's one of the main goals of ACS is to get more funding and make these tests more accessible and to have, better prevention techniques on top of the great prevention techniques that we already have. We can eliminate the top three easily if we're able to, allocate more resources and time and dedication to these tests in order to, lower the death rate from these top three deadly forms of cancer. And obviously the forms below are extremely devastating as well. It's just the top three for both male and female are some of the most easily detectable cancers and preventable cancers, and yet they still wreak havoc upon our population. So it's something that the American Cancer Society is heavily pushing to sort of eliminate those higher numbers for those three, for male and female respectively. So
yeah, how we doing on time? You want to get into a little break here? And
yeah,
okay,
we'll do a little break ski.
Yeah, we'll catch you for this conclusion.
Yeah. Catch you on the flip. Welcome back after that short little break and ad break for you guys. Ben and I are just going to continue talking about ACS and all that they do. We mentioned earlier before, that's a little double negative or whatever that is, but we mentioned earlier that ACS does a lot of stuff, including cancer research, but it also highlights a lot of the healthcare disparities in our country, using cancer diagnosis, treatment, and prevention as sort of its, foundation for understanding these and putting them in kind of perspective. As you guys are aware, and I'm sure you've seen this in news sources everywhere, but there are quantifiable health disparities. There you go.
Yeah.
There are quantifiable health disparities in our nation, and we can most heavily see this with the minority populations in our country. Ben is doing a lot of his graduate research on understanding and talking about these health disparities and sort of, understanding why they exist and sort of what we can do to, kind of eliminate these discrepancies in numbers and stuff like that. And so I'll let Ben talk about it because he's a little bit more, cultured on it than I am, but
yeah, I'm looking at this website and it's interesting that, since 1990, the overall cancer death rate has dropped faster in African Americans than in whites among men and women. And, largely driven by more rapid declines in blacks for cancers of the lung, colorectum, and prostate. But I think, what's more important is that African Americans have the highest death rate and shortest survival of any other racial and ethnic group in the United States for most cancers. And, as we've kind of talked about, this idea of statistics is so key to understanding public health, cancer prevention, diagnoses, things like that. But at the same time, that doesn't tell the whole side of the story. And I don't want to give too much away from future episodes, but this idea of systemic injustices and not giving equal care or equal access to care, the mistrust after being just violent and manipulative and exploitative towards African American communities with research. A lot of us know the story of Henrietta Lacks, and maybe we'll talk a little bit about that in that episode. You can touch on that because I'm sure you're familiar with it. But it's the case in Native American populations that this destructive nature sometimes in the history of our being that makes it difficult to attain the same type of care, catch things earlier. So I think what they're doing in this health equity initiative that they're taking on is important too. And I talked about it today in my history of public health directed readings class. This idea that like I said, in order to understand the whole story of something, you got to take into account the living conditions, the ways that this was in Los Angeles, for example, where there's clash between Chinese and Japanese immigrants coming in, this large population of Mexican immigrants, and then the more traditional that most people think of, this white-black idea of race and the differences. So, this is something that never really goes away.
Yeah.
I'm noticing it as I, make my way through the historiography and the history of health and medicine. There's aspects of biological racism, and then there's perpetuation of impoverished neighborhoods and blaming it on impoverished people and their culture, as opposed to addressing the issues at hand. So, like, I'll finish up with this one example from my book today, just because it's fresh in my mind. But this idea of public health leaders in Los Angeles, whose population goes from like 10,000 in 1880 to over 100,000 in 1900. So 20 years, and it's, tenfold or whatever that is. Like, that's crazy. So there's, and Los Angeles as a whole is this, is sprawling out, and they saw Mexican Americans as able to be assimilated into their Americanized, essentially. But they didn't with Chinese and Japanese Americans. So, as you can imagine, that's problematic. But in order to, I don't know how I want to phrase this. So, one of the issues was infant mortality among Mexican births, and instead of addressing like larger issues about like where they were living, their living conditions, the availability of like public housing, instead they focus on infant mortality and sustaining that, and pinning Mexican mothers as, not capable, and their culture deems themselves just not good mothers, essentially. So, and that's in, 1920 or whatever. So, you're looking at 100 years, and, the same sorts of access to care are, repeated in a lot of cases. And not to mention the distrust of, science and medicine from African Americans, and the lore of night doctors and things like that I'll get into a little bit. But it's something that, as I learn more and more about, I'm increasingly passionate about understanding some of the ways that our history still affects us today. And that was long-winded, but
no, you're good. I'm just reading it over again, and just kind of a little bright spot comes up that the gap is narrowing. Since 1990, like what you were mentioning, the overall cancer death rate has dropped, and obviously that's incredible. And for the reasons why we'll talk about later, but just the idea that we're narrowing that disparity says something, that the right voices are being heard, and that the causes that ACS stands for are working, and they're progressing towards a better place for everybody. And it makes one feel better about supporting this cause, knowing that there's actual data to back this information up, because it's one thing to support a cause and like believe in it, but it's just hot air, right? It's just to promote like a fallacy, or just sort of a little kind of sideshow. But with how long they've been around, and for what they've done for, citizens of the United States, but as well as people all around the world, because believe it or not, the United States acts as a role model for a lot of countries. And when they see that we're doing stuff correctly like this, and how we're combating cancer, it drives them to be better as well. And so it's just an overall positive environment for that. And looking at just how cancer specifically affects African Americans, and the discrepancies between white and black healthcare access, it's important to note that. So
Yeah. And there's a lot more to the story than statistics, like I said, and there's a lot more to it than, you know, driving 30 minutes for a physical, let's say. There's a lot of different things that go into public health. It's from seatbelts to mammograms to you name it, and a lot of these things are in place to preserve the health of the public, and that's in the name. But
yeah.
I don't know if you had something to say.
Very good.
Well, we mentioned it. We launched it. We leaked it early. This our friend. Can you still hear me if I back up a little bit?
Yeah, you're good. They're incredible.
Our friends at Oklahoma Shirt Company really did a nice job incorporating our alternate logo, if you will, with the American Cancer Societies, and they're going fast. So $20 a piece. Message us. We'll set up a Venmo. You can send the money here. $5 of every T-shirt purchase goes towards this this campaign, and we also will link our GoFundMe. It's a GoFundMe, right?
Correct. Yep.
Yeah, we'll link that in our bio for Instagram for the whole month. So if you just go to our page and click on that, you should be able to find it. And we already had a couple gracious donors, and I'm happy to keep this rolling and see what our Weekly Boost podcast community can do.
Yeah, and kind of just to end it on a good note. Like, this isn't for us. If we want to be blunt about it, it's for the better of the community. And if you don't care to support us in any way, but feel free to support the American Cancer Society, because what they do is beyond us and like what we stand for. It's what the world should stand for, as a better place. And so anything helps with them. They obviously COVID has struck chords in a lot of people's hearts and has made it difficult for a lot of people, but they're doing the right thing over at ACS, and they're trying to give back in as many ways possible. And fortunately for them, the way that they give back is treating and curing cancer and preventing people from passing away that obviously had a lot more life ahead of them. So we really appreciate you guys tuning into this one. We're super excited for the these upcoming Mondays, giving you guys good episodes, and we're looking forward to seeing where this takes us, as well as being able to help ACS out any way possible.
All right. Well, we'll catch you next week. Some more good stuff. Maybe we'll have one of those guests on. So
see you guys Monday.